Hello everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. For me in Perth, that is acknowledging the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of Boorloo. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Hello and thank you for attending our third webinar surrounding the On-Farm Connectivity Program. My name is Jason Bloxage and I am the On-Farm and Small Business Connectivity Lead at the Regional Tech Hub. In case you don't know, the Regional Tech Hub is a project run by the National Farmers Federation, funded by the Australian Government, which provides independent connectivity advice to regional, rural and remote Australians. In addition, over the past 6 months, we have been privileged to provide a support service for the On-Farm Connectivity Program, with over 400 producers across Australia reaching out to us for assistance. Last week, I had the opportunity to attend Future Ag in Melbourne, which allowed me to speak to many different farmers and also ag tech suppliers about their experiences on the program and also their feedback. So today's webinar is planned to last for around 60 minutes and we'll cover several different topics. The Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and Arts will provide an update on the program outcomes so far. We have several case studies of farmers using the program, and we hope to have Barbara Mason join us for a chat about her experience on the program. Next, we have Chris Taylor will join us to speak about the upcoming webinar, the upcoming 3G network shutdown and what we can do to prepare. And finally, we'll have time for questions. So if you have any questions, can you please pop them into the chat and we'll endeavour to go through them at the end. Okay, so I'd now like to introduce Miranda Robson, Alicia Delzeal and Michael Lankas from the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts. Miranda, Alicia and Michael administer the Australian Government's $30 million on-farm connectivity program and will provide us an update on the program. Okay, Michael, are you there?
Sure am. Do you see me? I should have, there we go. So I've got Alicia next to me and then Miranda is on her own laptop.
We're having technical issues.
But she can't unblock her camera, so what I might do is I'll flip my laptop around briefly.
That's okay. I am just allowing her right now.
Alrighty. So the update. So based off today's figures that we've gotten from the Business Grants Hub, we've approved $11 million worth of rebates, actually closer to 12 mil, and paid. So by paid, it's the suppliers putting in their claim for the rebate, 8.2 million. So there's just pretty par on 3 mil remaining for the program. And of course, the hard deadline is the 30th of May, or the 31st of May, or until the funding's exhausted. So it could teeter out before then. So there is still money in the bucket for the program.
Yep, no worry, Michael. So quick question, do we have any updates on round 2 or the planning that's going into that?
So round 2 is, we are planning, we're in the early planning stages for round 2. We are designing so it's going to function similar to round 1, but instead of it just being a Word document like we had for round 1 for the EOI, we are looking to do a more smart form. Of course, there will be the option, if required, to have the Word document if there are issues with the online version. So we've got the two, but our preference is to use the online version. And yeah, so that will be opening in the next couple of months, but we don't have a set date yet.
Yeah, no worry.
answer Phil's question that's just popped up again. There's
Yeah.
still $3 million remaining, Phil.
Yeah, so
Around
that's
what?
$3 million, and that closes on the 30th of May.
It is confusing my days.
So it is underway, preparations for round 2, but yeah, we don't have a deadline yet.
Okay, no worries at all. Thank you, Michael. If that's everything, we will keep moving on.
That's everything from my perspective, unless anyone's got any more questions. Otherwise, we can just hang on until the end of the call for the Q&A section.
Yeah, no worries at all, Michael. We'll gather the questions in there and we'll come back to you at the end.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So just as I said there, we'll keep, if you've got any questions, just put them through in the chat there and we will go through them at the end with the team over there. So once again, thank you to Miranda, Alicia and Michael for the update, and also to all the work the department are doing. So next up, we're going to go through several case studies of primary producers who have used the program's rebate to achieve wonderful outcomes. Okay, so first up, our first example we have is Barbara and Mark Mason. They are farmers from far west Queensland. Together they manage a property called Mirage Plains near Cunnamulla with more than 52,000 hectares. This operation does a mixture of cropping and running 10,000 Dorper sheep. So the Masons' property suffers from a lack of no mobile reception, which also makes it hard for contract labourers to communicate with each other out in the field. This is a fairly common issue across many rural and remote farm locations in Australia. Due to no connectivity, all the water monitoring was done reactively. So Barbara mentioned that before FarmBot, you would have a helicopter or plane up mustering, and they would say, it looks like you have a bit of a water problem out there. Another issue of no connectivity was not knowing if the centre pivots became bogged overnight. So I heard this was an issue quite a few times. So the solution they used was when the on-farm connectivity program came along, the Masons took advantage by contacting 2 approved suppliers, which were FarmBot and Connected Farms. Barbara mentioned that to upgrade their water infrastructure, they first needed a technology solution that solved their lack of connectivity. So the team across at Connected Farms, when we had Tom, who's the CEO, who was on last webinar having a chat about their business, set up a satellite connection to the ground with a solar panel battery system to power it. From there, they used each pivot point in the paddock to spread Wi-Fi across a total area of 240 hectares. From here, FarmBot solved the water structure issues by installing multiple remote water tank monitoring devices, and they also connected up 3 rain gauge stations around the property. These solutions provided immediate water recording data for a mobile app. So as we can see on the screen there, that's just a picture of the mobile app. So there were several great outcomes achieved through the program using the rebate available with the on-farm connectivity program. Barbara mentioned that the 2 connectivity solutions had been on her wish list for a couple of years, but always were pushed to the bottom as it wasn't a necessity. But when you get a grant for it, it makes it accessible. So using 2 applications with 2 different approved suppliers allowed them to achieve their goals, improving management of their water resources through monitoring. The addition of connectivity to the property has allowed not only remote operation of the centre pivots, but also provided them with better farm safety for their contractors. So they now have the ability to make Wi-Fi calls in the field in those 240 hectares that now have connectivity. Barbara also mentioned that the process was super easy and both suppliers were great to work with. It also got them thinking about their future technology upgrades And that looks like they're looking at installing an auto drafter with a scanner at their sheep yards to take care of their upcoming mandated EID tag requirements. So as we can see, that's a great outcome that the Masons were able to achieve with the program. So I'll now hand across to my General Manager, Jen, who will go through the next case study.
Thank you so much, Jason. Just to check you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep, all good. Thank you so much, everybody. As a farmer from Gunning in New South Wales, I actually don't love talking about people's stories because they're so unique to them. But having said that, so if Scott or Trudy jump online, we're not sure if they're able to make it, but we certainly I had the pleasure of speaking to Scott a few weeks ago and really understanding how and why he used this service and why he sort of applied for the rebate. And it's an absolutely fabulous story that I'm sure will have certainly resonated with me, and I'm sure with other farmers on this call. So Scott, he actually comes from Billawheeler up in Queensland, and he is a 4th generation farmer up there, and he farms with his family and some young kids and his beautiful wife. They have 1,600 hectares of broadacre cropping and also a cattle operation. So one of the things that I would describe Scott as a fairly innovative person, and particularly having done some research on Scott, just looking at some of the things that he has adopted, I would definitely put him up the front of the innovation curve, which is great. But it's interesting, though, with all that innovation and things that are happening on their farm, that one of their biggest thing that kept them up at night was around the farm safety and security. So just kind of, I guess, looking at all the machinery he had, like he had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of machinery. Of course, he's got lots of livestock there, and as any cropper would know, so much diesel and fuel sitting on farm that, that posed a bit of a risk, I guess, to his operation. As I said, being a bit of an innovator, he actually had tried a few solutions. So he'd sort of tried some cheaper options, I should say, in terms of some video surveillance. And actually, ironically, admittedly, the actual units themselves broke down. Obviously, it's a bit of a harsh environment up there in Queensland in terms of rain and obviously heat. So that was certainly a challenge, but also just one of the biggest challenges that he hadn't quite foreseen was connectivity. And that actually was a bit of a real barrier, I guess, in terms of Scott and his family being able to solve this challenge of security on his place. So when the on-farm connectivity program came up, he sort of investigated some of his options and ended up having a good chat with Landwatch Australia. And Landwatch Australia kind of came to him with a really comprehensive system of how to solve not only just his video surveillance systems, but also to look at how he can solve his connectivity. And certainly, I think he was initially a little bit shocked at sort of how in-depth the process could be in terms of the solutions that were available to him. Certainly, having Landwatch Australia help walk him through that process was certainly something that ended up meaning that he was able to forego some of those sort of cheap options and trying to solve it himself, right through to having Landwatch Australia come in and sort out what his issues were. And certainly he's been impressed, I guess, with the ability with their after sales service. And I'm not trying to do a session here for Landwatch Australia necessarily. There are other surveillance options, but just in terms of some of the things that he wanted to get out of the program in terms of taking that pressure off him and being able to make sure that he could identify, as it says there, identify any security breaches quickly and work really closely with that company afterwards to manage that. And, it was interesting for him. I sort of asked him, what was the benefit of the program? And obviously it was a 50% contribution. I don't think anyone would knock back that side of it, but it certainly enabled him to, in his words, sort of take a more comprehensive approach to it. So, he wouldn't have thought about doing it in such a comprehensive way if it wasn't for that rebate. And he's certainly been able to install that on his property and given him peace of mind and given his family peace of mind that they have that coverage. From that area, they certainly are looking at an uptick in crime, and certainly it's a way that they feel that they have been able to manage that. And while, he was pretty realistic about the fact that a video surveillance system is not going to necessarily stop the threat, he felt that it did give him just that little bit extra peace of mind in terms of being able to resolve an issue or at least get onto it really quickly if something did pop up. So at this stage, having spoken to Scott, he's really happy with how it all came together. He did feel that the process of application was really easy and simple. I suspect that's because the suppliers actually put the application in on the producer's behalf. So that's obviously a good thing if you're going down that path. But from his perspective, he felt like there's a few, things to sign, a little bit of information that he had to provide. And then after that, the hard work was done by the supplier and obviously the department. So certainly, yeah, he was really appreciative of that opportunity to work with it. And again, it's just given his family that sort of, I guess, walking into what is a big operation that they have running up there. They know that sort of side of the business is pretty well looked after, which is great. If that's okay, Jason, I'll just move now to a fabulous story about Trudy Oxley and Paul Thompson. So Thompson, sorry. So they run. This is an interesting one actually. They run a really large station called Larrakia Station in the NT. It's about 45,000 hectares, and they run about 1,500 breeder cattle. I am a sheep producer from down south, so the fact I'm using the words 45,000 hectares is blows my mind in terms of some of the challenges and other things that they come across and have to deal with. So actually under the on-farm connectivity program, Trudy and Paul invested in OptiWeigh technology, and the aim there was to gain some real-time data on the weight of their cattle. And the issue or the problem that kind of arose for them was that there was some out-of-season rainfall that happened in, I think, June last year. And they, have a lot of trouble accessing parts of their property throughout the year, given, flooding and other things in that sort of flat country up there. And also just it's so large, just getting around and seeing what their cattle are up to can be quite challenging. So one of the things that they then happened to them was, as I said, that out of season rain in June meant that they couldn't get on to their place, and they basically brought in their cattle, which is around 25 kilometres one way, to bring their cattle in. And unfortunately, they worked out when they got to the yards that they were actually underweight to get on a boat. Now, that was a real challenge for them. And I'm just going to actually, if I could, read a quote that when we were sort of talking to them and they came up with, I think it kind of illuminates what happens here. So this is a quote from Trudy in saying that they had we had the OptiWeigh unit, instead of having to do a $5,000 or $6,000 muster with a 25 kilometre walk in and 25 kilometre walk back, to be able to just drive in and leave the unit in the paddock and understand that their rate of weight loss was much worse than usual. We could have intervened much earlier and got a very different result 5 or 6 months later. So the point there is that they were able to actually go and use OptiWeigh technology, which is basically, I don't know if anyone's aware of it, it's basically like a single unit where cattle kind of are encouraged to go up, they walk on it. There's a picture of it, one Jason prepared earlier. And basically, if that's left in a paddock, it can actually get some good weights and really give the farmer up-to-date information available on what their cattle weights. And they basically that's processed through the app, so you can see that in fairly well in real time. So that was one of the challenges that they found, and basically once they worked out that the cattle hadn't made weight, they ended up potentially could have had to have held their cattle for another 12 months. Everyone here can imagine the cash flow implications from that, not only also the impact on their general operations. So that investment in OptiWeigh certainly was a big one for their family and their farm operation, and a fabulous quote, I guess, from Trudy was that the 50% rebate removes some of the risks of trialing new technology. And I really love that. It removes the risk of trialing new technology. And to be honest, even on our farm, we face that. We're sort of, always weighing up the ROI on investing in new information and new technologies. And having that 50% rebate was certainly that took that little bit of risk away, particularly when they could, Trudy and Paul could see such a big investment or potential investment, but knowing that they had that ability to get that 50% rebate meant that it kind of brought it back into the frame of what was possible. And certainly it's really exciting to see what they've done and to see how they have potentially overcome what is a really challenging issue, I guess, for them, particularly in that part of Australia. And it's, it's a credit to them that they've taken this step, and certainly as that 50% rebate, it's really great to see that that's come together for them. Jason, I might pass that back to you. That was just a couple of examples where we have seen some really innovative and interesting ways that people have engaged with the on-farm connectivity, and particularly looking at the fact that they, a little bit outside the square. When we think of connectivity, we think antennas and, boosting connectivity and other things, but you can see how the program is able to support things that really do address problems that people are facing in their businesses. So props to those people that we've spoken to, and thank you very much for the willingness to engage with us and show us how it's made a big difference to their property.
Thank you, Jen. I actually can update you that unfortunately Barbara is unable to make it. So Barbara, actually, I was talking to her yesterday, has been flooded in on her property for about 3 weeks with all the rain that they've got up in Queensland. So yeah, I guess they've got water monitoring, and now, yeah, they've got water everywhere. So thanks for that. We will now move along. Just a brief oversight just about who we are, the On-Farm Connectivity Information Service. So as I mentioned earlier, the Regional Tech Hub, it provides that one-to-one support service for those seeking information about the on-farm connectivity program. So whether that is for the current round of funding or for the upcoming future round, we can assist you as much as possible. So if you give us a call on 1300 081 029, we'd be only too happy to help. So we also have some great additional resources available online to help you navigate, I guess, this complex and sometimes really tricky world of connectivity and also ag tech. There's lots and lots of options out there, as I found out last week. Saw some great new robots and very interesting ways of delivering services. So our website has just been relaunched. We've just rebuilt it and relaunched it, the regionaltechhub.org.au, and it does contain numerous fact sheets, guides and case studies about the program and also about AgTech. Another great resource is the federal government's infrastructure.gov.au website. It lists the approved suppliers and also the equipment that's approved underneath it. And it also does go through the process of the applications. And another great resource that I really like spruiking is the agtechfinder.com. So it's an independent marketplace helping Australian farmers and producers sort, search and compare the different ag tech solutions. And the great part about it is the website is an initiative of Non-Profit Food Agility, CRC. So last week I did actually manage to catch up with Chris over there at AgTech Finder, and the exciting news he was telling me about them going to launch a new website in the next month. So that'll be great. They're going to revamp it and relaunch it. And yeah, it's a great website to be able to compare all the different sort of options out there. So moving along, I'd like to now bring back Jen, who's already introduced herself. And also we have Chris Taylor from Telstra. So Chris Taylor is the Regional General Manager for the ACT and Southern New South Wales. And he has 20 years experience in telecommunications. And today they're going to have a discussion about the upcoming Telstra 3G shutdown and just what this means for primary producers. So I hand it across to you guys.
Thank you very much, Jason. So I was hoping that I'll get Chris just to introduce himself in a second. So rather than doing death by PowerPoint, and I 100% am not saying that was going to happen, Chris, I'm sure you would have delivered a fabulous PowerPoint presentation. I just thought there might be an opportunity for me to sort of just ask you a few questions, particularly from that producer lens in terms of what's happening with the 3G shutdown, if I could. But first, I might just throw to you, what's your background? How have you landed here? And what's your sort of engagement with rural, regional and remote Australia?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. My background, I'm actually a mechanical engineer, so don't ask me how I ended up in telecommunications, but I had 10 years in the electricity industry before I joined Telstra back in 2000. I've worked in the network planning part of the business. I was in Telstra Countrywide when we started that business unit back in 2003, and I've covered roles in regional Australia all over New South Wales. So I've worked, I know New South Wales very intimately, and obviously there's a lot of commonality when you get into regional remote areas that you could sort of understand the circumstances, you know, across various parts of the country. So I'm now based down in Canberra, but looking after southern New South Wales. I was around when we closed the CDMA network and actually launched the 3G network. So I was actually out in Western New South Wales, covering areas out as far as Broken Hill back then. So lived and breathed that change with our regional customers, and certainly understand the fear and apprehension with technology changes, particularly when we talk about mobile coverage. And part of our role over the last 5 years since we announced the 3G closure has been to try and work to support our customers and the communities to understand what the change means and how to prepare for it.
Thanks, Chris. It sounds like we've got the man for the job, 20 years. So you mentioned the fear around change. So as I mentioned before, I'm a farmer. We've always relied on 3G. Back in the day, a lot of farmers switched off 4G because it was better on 3G, those types of challenges. There is a genuine concern, I would say, around the changeover. Can you tell us why it's needed? Like what benefits are we actually going to see from it?
Yeah. So it's a really good question, because we shouldn't be just doing things for the sake of it. But when we launched the 3G network back in, I think it's about 18 years old, the technology, and 18 to 20 years old. And back in the day, it's a voice network that carries SMS and a little bit of data. And people remember when we first launched it, it was the first time I think we ever had to make video calls and start to use a little bit of the internet back then. But the reality over particularly the last 5 to 10 years, is that people are adapting different uses for the mobile network, and mobile data has become, really critical. And the use and consumption and the demand for mobile data is increasing about 30% a year. And the 3G network, simply, that technology doesn't have the capacity and capability to be able to cope with that continuing increased demand. 4G network and the 5G networks are mobile data networks that now carry voice, been adapted to carry voice. And so what we need to do is move our customers onto those technologies so we can continue to build and add capacity to cater for that growing data demand, but at the same time, continue to allow voice and people to make, phone calls and things like that, which is in a lot of areas exactly what people want to be able to do.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Chris. So, look, it sounds like it's needed, but I found out an interesting stat the other day that in the average Australian household, there are 22 to 24 connected devices, which blew my mind in terms of how wide and potentially how challenging this shutdown is going to be. Not to mention, as we said, we've got a whole lot of farmers and people from the ag industry on the line. There's a whole range of telemetry and other sort of ag tech solutions that are on farm. Can you walk us through what we should be doing? What are the steps that farmers and others should be doing from a household perspective, perhaps right through to an on-farm scenario where we're driving tractors that are GPS? We've got an amazing amount of technology that's on farm. What's the steps?
Yeah, so and this is what makes it complex for people. You've got the network end, which we're investing to get the network end ready. And what we committed at the start of this whole exercise is that we would ensure that our 4G coverage was the same or better than 3G before we closed the network. And we've had a large network build program to work to try and achieve that. And what we mean by 4G coverage being the same is that where you can now make a handheld call and connect to the 3G network, and our coverage maps say that you should be able to have handheld coverage on the 3G network, we want you to be able to do that on the 4G network at the time we close it. So a large build program happening from that end. But of course, to add to the complexity, there's the device end. And this is particularly for our farming communities. It can be mobile handsets, tablets, then your telemetry devices. It could be FPOS machines, a whole range of different things that connect to the network potentially. So really important to understand the device you've got and what it's connecting to, what network it's connecting to, and then understand whether that is going to work when we close the 3G network. Now, in terms of mobile handsets, we've recently launched an SMS tracker tool for our Telstra customers and any other customers who have their service with a mobile virtual network operator that use Telstra's network, that if you send a text message to the mobile number 3498, if you send a text message with the number 3 to that mobile number, it will come back and tell you your device and whether it's compatible when we close the 3G network, or alternatively, it will say your device won't work when we close the 3G network. This is what you need to do. For telemetry devices, and as such, we've been working with the agricultural industry. We've been working with the banking industries, any of the industries that sell or provide platforms or devices on the mobile network for a number of years now, and we're advising our customers where we know they're using a SIM provided by us and being billed there. Really important to go back and talk to your platform provider, to understand what your device is connecting to and whether it will work when the network closes, and then work with your device supplier about what the alternatives are to ensure that you can stay connected when that network closes.
Thanks, Chris. And look, I've done that, text that number. So Jason, I might ask if you wouldn't mind popping the phone number. It's only 4 numbers that you need to text number 3 to. And it shot me back a text message in about 1 second. So I would encourage people on this call literally to get on your phone and text 3 to that number that will pop up in the chat. So just recapping there. So, I mean, there is a lot of concern on farm around what that means. And so your suggestion is definitely to speak to your provider if you've got any concerns or questions about that. One of the things that we also receive here at the Regional Tech Hub is that some back in the day and potentially even some suppliers were recommending to use 3G only. So even if it's got 4G, 5G capability, some of those systems have actually been like you've forced it into 3G only. So that's the other thing to look out for. It actually may not be your technology. It may be a settings issue as well. So just to keep that in mind. But Chris, I just wanted to pick up something you said around the mapping. So the guarantee is that if you're in a mapped area where you should be getting coverage, that will be either 4G equivalent or better. But the challenge is for farmers, and I'll use our farm as an example. You can stand on one leg over at the sheep yards and you may get it, or you know a hill where you can get coverage. So based on that, and I think Telstra are calling it fortuitous coverage. So we'll need to sort of remap our thinking around whether or not we can get that, because if we aren't technically in a mapped area and you may have just happened to be in the right spot, is that right that you'll have to kind of in some ways rethink that and go around and find out where those spots are, or is it likely that they will still get coverage once the 3G is shut down?
Yeah, fortuitous coverage is a really important thing to consider. Fortuitous coverage is where when we turn a network on or make changes to the network, there are some areas that fall outside of our published coverage footprint, where just by the nature of the environment at the time, people happen to get coverage. And the reason we don't guarantee it in those areas is because it's highly susceptible to change over time, whether environmental changes like growth of trees and other types of conditions. And invariably, when we go and make a change to the network, which we're constantly doing as we upgrade the network, those conditions can change on those real extremities. It's not a fault of the network; it's just by nature of the work we do. So we've got some examples. I can quote some examples in my area where we've done work on the network to improve the 4G coverage, and some people in those areas that we call fortuitous, those little areas where you can stand on a postage stamp and get coverage, that's no longer there, but it appears in other areas because just slight antenna changes can actually change those things. And they're the things that we can't control and we can't guarantee, and that's why we publish our coverage maps to where we can control and guarantee that. The other thing is, it's important to know, is that people using network extension devices and things like that to boost their coverage, that it's important to make sure that all of your equipment is compatible with the 3G network. Old Yagi antennas and things, and We've got some information that we can share out to help you identify that. There's some old Yagi antennas out there that are will only work on the 3G network. They weren't set up for the frequencies that 4G work on. That may need to look at updating those. And the other thing also is that with your, you said it earlier, with your devices, traditionally when we first launched the 4G network about 8 or 9 years ago, 3G footprint was much quicker, was much bigger. So people were being recommended to force your handset to 3G because that was the bigger amount of coverage. It's time to go back and just remove those settings, because in majority of instances now, you will be able to get 4G, and potentially you're not allowing yourself that opportunity. There's still a little bit of work to do. We've still got about 100 towers to add 4G technology to in some of the more remote areas in the last 8 weeks. And that will come and that will happen, and people will more and more see 4G available on their handsets rather than just 3G.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just picking up a comment there from Michael, and yes, that number only does work for Telstra. So we are actually also, given we're an independent service, we're also working quite closely with Optus as well. So just noting that their 3G shutdown is also happening in September this year. So we will be having a further webinar actually on the 30th of April. National Farmers Federation is running that webinar. It's an hour-long conversation with both Telstra and Optus, and we'll delve in a little bit more into some of this detail. Just before I go, I've got two quick, well, actually one main question still is just around if you could explain the bars. So talk me through this. So the bars on the phone no longer really give an accurate, indication of whether or not you can make a call?
That's right, and comparing bars on phones between the networks. So if you think back to when we launched 3G, it was one network and it was predominantly voice-based. So the global standards allowed you to compare signal strength on that network. But what we've got now, we've got a 3G network, a 4G network, a 5G network. Two of those networks are data networks that have voice capability, and one is a voice network that has data capability. You cannot compare. There's no global standards to be able to look across those different technologies and actually compare what the bars on the phones are actually telling you about signal strength and how good the connection is. And it's the same between handset manufacturers. So I can't have an iPhone and a Samsung handset side by side on the same network. That they can tell me two completely different things. There's no global standard. So the real way to know whether you've got a decent signal is, can I make a voice call and hold that and have a good reliable experience making that voice call, or can I create a data session without getting dropouts and have a decent experience? And we've got some examples that we generally show when we have slides of in the same location, a 3G, a handset on 3G and a handset on 4G holding a data session. One shows 2 bars of 3G coverage and it's downloading data at 9 megabits per second, and on the 4G it's got one bar of coverage and it's downloading at 80 megabits per second. So really impossible to be able to look at them and go 3G is better than 4G or 4G is better than 3G. It's about being able to hold the experience.
There's just a couple of questions. I'm conscious, I'm sure Jason's come back online, so I stopped talking and asking you questions, but there's just a couple that have come through. Jason, am I right to quickly ask Chris these questions that are on there?
That's okay. I'm happy
There's one.
either way.
Oh, great. Thank you. There's one there from Rebecca Stacey. So will coverage be more consistent once 3G is turned off? Currently, issues occur when devices switch between networks, but typically 3G is better at the moment. Are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, so some people, we're still tinkering with the network in a lot of areas, doing the optimization. So some people are going to see that sort of experience. And we've always had a feature on the network where, because 3G was typically much bigger in coverage area, where we forced calls. If you're driving away from a base station on the 4G network, you get to the end of 4G coverage before you get to the end of 3G coverage, because typically 3G is bigger. We'd force the call to move on to 3G before you hit the extremities of 4G to minimise dropouts. And so some people are still going to be seeing that because that feature on some base stations is still turned on. And as we get nearer to the closure, and as our engineers check and confirm that our coverage is equivalent, we turn that feature off, and you won't see those sort of that you'll see less and less of just 3G on your handset, and you might see less and less of those disruptions as well between the two networks fighting and competing for for the connection to your phone and your handset as well. So I completely understand that people at the moment may be seeing some of those dynamics play out.
Chris, there's one from Rachel Plowman, sorry, just to jump in there, because it's one that we get all the time, which is that 3G coverage seems to have been reduced over the last 12 to 18 months. Is that a similar scenario where you artificially holding down the system while this transition's happening? Because we see this comment all the time. And what would be the steps if that is something you're experiencing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and we certainly haven't changed anything on the 3G network, and our coverage maps haven't changed. So we would still expect that you're seeing the same experience that our coverage maps are saying that you should be. What we typically also find in cases, it can be linked closely to maybe network congestion as well. As the traffic on a network increases and loads up, networks sort of breathe, and on the outer extremities will breathe in and out with traffic on the network. The more traffic on the network, it will suck the actual dynamic will suck the coverage into where that traffic is. So people on the outskirts may see those changes probably more exacerbated than in other areas. That could be one of the things that are playing out there. But certainly if people believe that their experience has deteriorated, we need to look at the specific circumstances to be able to sort of understand on a case-by-case basis. Call us in and register a complaint so that we can investigate it. And alternatively, if your team picked that up, Jen, and wanted to pass on details, we can certainly work with those customers to really understand what's happening there. Whole range of things when you get network extension devices involved, and it could be a raft of things. It's really difficult to give a one-size-fits-all answer to that.
Chris, I've got a question over here, Chris. So Rebecca Stacey asked, what is a data session versus a voice call when you're trying to have a conversation?
Yeah, so a data session, so I guess there's two types of voice calls too. You can be making a voice call over our mobile network, or you can be making a voice call through apps like WhatsApp and over Messenger, which becomes then a sort of data call and data session as well, because it uses mobile data. And if it's purely just over the mobile network, we prioritise voice over the mobile network, by the way, so that in an instance where a mobile tower starts to become congested because of high data usage, our mobile calls will be unaffected because we prioritise the voice over the data. So you've sort of got two different lanes, if you like, or traffic lanes. There's one for voice and one for data, and hopefully that sort of explains it.
Thanks, Chris.
But we do prioritise voice on our network over data in the instance where we start to see congestion on our network.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Chris. I'll go back to a couple of on-farm connectivity questions here. This one's probably a good one for us, Jen. So we live in an area where limited connectivity within our home setting. Where can I go to receive advice on boosting our signal, as far as what hardware would be required to improve signal in our house when most of our farm business takes place?
Well, thank you very much for the question. That's a perfect segue into what the Regional Tech Hub does. And I promise I didn't even pre-prepare that one. Look, the Regional Tech Hub is absolutely there as a completely free and completely independent advice service. So, you know, we literally work with all the telcos. We work with the software, hardware guys. There are, in many cases, solutions to increase or boost connectivity. And we know it's a consistent challenge in regional Australia. So please don't sit there thinking there's nothing that I can do. There potentially are solutions that we can offer you. Our team works right across the country in regional areas. So we live and work in regional areas. So we really do understand it. The easiest way is either to jump online and look at the information yourself. We do have that 1300 number for people to call. And literally our team is just sitting around regional Australia taking phone calls from people like yourselves that are on this call. But also we also have a contact us form for people to just specifically write down or book a time even in with us to actually speak to one of our team at a time that suits you. So plenty of ways to get in touch. One thing I would just say is please do not sit there if you are having connectivity challenges, and potentially there may be solutions that you may be able to apply for through this program, depending on your situation and your circumstances. But thank you for the question.
No, I've got a question here. This one will be for you, Michael. So does the equipment have to be purchased prior to the rebate application? What if the landholders are wanting infrastructure but would hold off on purchase until funding is approved?
That is a great question. So basically how it works is the primary producer will approach the equipment supplier that's selling the product that they're after. The equipment supplier will then apply and get a pre-approval, if you will. Once that pre-approval's come through, they've got 60 days to purchase, to complete the purchase with the primary producer. And then they've got another 60 days to supply, install and deliver and claim for rebate. The primary producer would then is purchasing the equipment at that 50%, up to 50% discount from the equipment supplier once their application's been approved.
Perfect. So I've got another question here for you, Michael. Can the department, this is Vicky Smith asked, can the department share the number of approved applications? So approximately how many farm businesses have benefited to date?
Yep. So of the approved applications, there's been 1,396. That does include any, not necessarily duplicates, but if a single farmer primary producer has used the rebate multiple times from different equipment suppliers, which they're allowed to do, it may also capture if they've done that. So if they've bought something from FarmBot, for example, and then they've bought something else from Optiway, that would be captured in that figure.
Awesome. And one more question, although we can probably help here. Are there approved on-farm surveillance companies based in Victoria on the approved list?
Off the top of my head, that is a tricky one for me to answer. However, we do obviously have the list of equipment suppliers on the website.
Yeah, and I'd add there, and if you wanted to reach out to the Regional Tech Hub, we'd be happy to have a look at that list for you and see what we can information we can provide for you. One more here from Vicky for you, Michael, which is, can on-farm connectivity funds be used to purchase upgraded 4G and 5G devices?
So if it falls into the catalogue of eligible equipment, so what we've done is we've been quite broad with our eligible equipment. We haven't explicitly said this is the type of equipment that will be eligible, like down to the device level. What we've opted for is the 5 broad categories. So being low power wide area networks, connectivity equipment, environmental monitoring, farm management, and remote automation and control. When you're talking about the upgraded 4G, 5G stuff, it would be dependent on if the approved supplier that you're approaching has included that on their price list when they applied to be a part of the program.
Yeah, so I can add there that I do know that cell fires, one's for your home and one's for your car, we're on the list there. So there is a couple of different providers that are doing that on there. So that sort of equipment's covered. And I imagine, I would say almost all the agri-tech equipment is 4G and 5G compatible. So there wouldn't be anything getting sold nowadays. That's 3G, 3G only. One more for you, actually, Michael. Does the grant apply only to purchase, or can you make application from the hire of equipment?
Yeah, so it does have to be a purchase, so it can't be used for the hiring of equipment.
Yep, no worries at all. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for you, Michael. Do you have any other questions, Jen?
No, I don't. If I could just though thank Chris and Michael and obviously the 3 case studies that we provided. I know you'll do the wrap up, but personally, from my perspective, it's really helpful to hear how farmers are using this type of technology. I think from the outset, I just thought, you know, something, put an aerial on something, and of course, you know, that's a very limited view of how to increase your connectivity through this program. So just hearing how others have used the program and how they're, I guess, thinking about innovation and how to sort of get that 50% rebate, let's not lie, has been really informative. And certainly we've got that other webinar as well. If we pick up what Chris has been saying around the 3G shutdown, we have that webinar, which is a, you know, full hour, I guess, in terms of what it means for people in rural, regional and remote. That is happening next at 12 o'clock next week. I think it is the 30th, which is, I think, the Tuesday. So please get amongst that if you're looking to have a little bit further in-depth conversation around what it means for you on your farm. But yeah, I just wanted to personally reach out and thank Barbara, Trudy, and also Scott for their efforts in sharing their stories. It's, as a farmer, as I said, it's really helpful from my perspective.
Yeah, I just want to add just a couple of important points just as we're finishing up with the webinar here. So the on-farm connectivity program, there's still $3 million left in the program. That closes on the 30th of May. So make sure you get those applications in before that. And just had a question here about if there will be a recording of the session made available. So yes, we will have a recording. We've got the other 2 up already on our YouTube channel, but we will have it up hopefully by tomorrow, dependent, but it will be up on our website, and I will send an email out to everyone who registered for the webinar to get a copy of that link. Okay, so I think that's everything. Just once again, thanks everyone for coming along. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to Chris and the department for all their assistance. And yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.